I'm Ryan.
And I am Jake.
And together, we are... What are we?
We're functionally literate.
That's right, we can read.
That is... yeah, we
That's
can
a
read.
lie. That's a lie. Jake can't read.
I don't say it like that. I can fucking read. What do you mean?
No, I'm sorry.
Mean?
Zach and I razz on each other about how we can't read all the time.
That's fair. No, I'm dyslexic, so it's mean.
I realize that might hit a little bit close to home for you.
No, it's okay. It's actually fine. I'm used to it. It's okay.
Okay. So, for context, Jake is dyslexic. He can read. He can read.
I can.
It's just, it's hard.
Here's the thing, right, for all the dyslexic listeners who want to read. Go and check out bionic reading. Like, low-key, life-saving, incredible. Sped my reading speed up and, like, my retention of information by,
you were
like,
telling me about
tenfold.
this recently.
Yeah, it's actually incredible. Life-changing. So I convert all of the documents and stuff that I work on and all the things that I do paperwork-wise into bionic reading now, and it is fantastic. It's astounding.
I will include a link to that in the link dump if you want to share a link with me later.
Yeah, that it's definitely a winner. And there's a couple of, because bionic reading is paid, there's a couple of like free ones for browsing online. So if you want to read articles and stuff, there's a free one as well that you can just install, and it does it on any web page, which includes, I do believe, PDFs on web browsers.
Awesome.
So
that actually, genuinely, when you told me about that sounded amazing.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. But
anyway, there's a book. There's a book.
Book.
We finished last episode. Where were we? We were on the roof.
First, is the book we're reading is 14. We are discussing today chapters 7 through 13.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, let's recap where we were. So,
we were tits out on the roof. That's what we...
Yes, where we recently most left off, there were tits out on the roof.
Yes.
But so Nate, he moved into this apartment building that is unusually cheap, and there's just odd stuff, right? Like, in his kitchen, there is a light that only gives off black light. There's these double doors near the laundry room that are locked, but they look far too fancy for the building.
Yeah, there was a big glance at door number 14 as well, with this double padlocks during one of the chapters. We've met the manager of the building, the German manager of the building, who's very... yes, he's very interesting character. Seems a bit of a hard ass, you know?
Yeah.
And we've established that the main character is a very aware and very high perception individual.
Yeah, he's a bit of a snoop. Like he just wants to look at everything.
A bit of a snoop.
Chapter 7. How Nate discovered his building was a national landmark, and how he officially met Mandy. So, in this chapter, Nate has now been living in his new place for 10 days, and he realized he needed to check his mail. Like, he forwarded his mail, but he hasn't actually checked to see if it's actually been showing up. So, he goes to check, and, it's full of a bunch of junk mail for him, and then mail from somebody else. Like, presumably whoever lived in the apartment before him.
Yeah.
And so while checking out the mailroom, he saw this enormous pile of phone books.
Which, when did phone books become, like, fully obsolete, do you reckon?
Phone books are still a thing.
I know, but they're obsolete.
They are obsolete.
They are obsolete.
I think they became fully obsolete by, 2015, 2016.
That's
in my opinion.
In my mind, that's a little bit late. I don't know why. Like, Did you use, like, after 2010, for example, did you actually use a phone book ever?
So me personally, I stopped using phone books by the time I got my first smartphone. So
when was that?
I got my first smartphone when I was in high school. So when I was like this, that would have been about 2013, 2014.
Okay.
So yeah, so like phone books for me have been obsolete. But it's one of those things where phone books.
What was your first smartphone? Oh, sorry to go.
No, you're fine.
Spam.
My first smartphone, I believe it was called a Moto G. It was a Motorola phone.
Okay.
It like had like old school Android OS operating system.
Yeah.
Like, you remember the little green Android mascot?
Yeah, I remember
that was a big thing on my phone. Like, all of the widgets had like that little Android mascot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first smartphone.
Do you remember
it was this dinky little thing?
Do you remember the LG cookie?
No.
No?
No.
When I was So, let me find out when the LG cookie came out.
Yeah,
that was in 2008.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It was, I would argue that it was, like right at the start of like that smartphone era.
But would you agree that like as soon as you get a smartphone, that's when phone books are obsolete?
Oh yeah. I'm just sidetracking completely because for those who know like the LG cookie, like for those who don't, look that up because that thing was, I bought it, right? And I was like so happy. I was like, oh my God, I've got this smartphone, right? And then it just became the bane of my existence. It was the worst thing. So like, this was back when you had to pay for credit. So like,
I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember those dumb ads, like you had to pay for your minutes and all that.
This makes me feel so fucking old. But I'd put £10 of call time on my phone, right? And back then, for me, £10, a lot of money. I was like, £10 is, like my pocket money. So I'd put it on my phone. And then this goddamn LG cookie would just ring people from my pocket and use all of my fucking credit.
Oh no, your butt dials wasted all your credit. No.
It was like, I would literally, I think I one of the times somehow my phone rang myself in my pocket and left myself like a 30-minute voicemail.
Oh my God.
And I had no credit left. I was like, well, anyway, back to the book. I fucking hate that phone. That phone is cursed. Fuck you, LG. Please sponsor Ryan's podcast.
The LG cookie. That's such a stupid name. Okay,
I know.
Circling back. Nate found a bunch of fucking phone books just in the mailroom, and like they had been there for so long, like you couldn't even stack them straight because the spines had rolled. Like they were just like a mess.
Yeah.
So he decided to just do everyone a favor and throw them out. And then like he's like, wait, no, recycling. There's a recycling dumpster out around back. So like he picks up a big stack of them. And while going to throw out his first load, like a neighbor that he hasn't met yet, like opens the door for him. The latch, like it was one of those wooden gates, I think. So like he helps him with it, and he's just like, "Oh, thank you." And then the guy's like, "No, hey, I'm just glad somebody's throwing those out. Like they've
Who
been
was
an
this
eyesore."
neighbor?
He's not named.
Interesting. I wonder when he comes back.
Yeah, I wonder that too. But like I remember that he had like kind of an odd, like the narrator had like an interesting voice for the character. So I think you'll know when he comes up again.
Yeah.
So yeah, like he just starts throwing them out, and he got through like half of the phone books, and before he was just like, all right, I've done enough. Like this is a pain in the ass. And then like he spreads out the rest. And then, like, while he's spreading them out, he sees behind what's left of them, there were 3 plaques that were hidden behind the phone books, saying that the building was a national landmark.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't say why, though. This was kind of like it's a national landmark for no reason. And it's like not something that's easily found out. And it's not listed on like the headstone. It's not listed on any of the plaques. But it's recognized, I do believe, by like a couple of different... Like, based on the plaques, there are a handful of different plaques recognizing it.
As I recall, it was recognized nationally, and it was recognized by the state, and I think it said something about it being, like, the 4th recognized landmark or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, but it doesn't say anything about why. And so, like, that was something that, like, stood out in Nate's mind.
Yeah.
And so then, like, on his way up to his apartment, he runs into Mandy, who was the woman that was running out late for work when Nate was moving in. And so they walk and talk as they go upstairs because she lives across the hall from him. So they're just like chit-chatting mostly. Like she's like, "Oh, what can I tell you about the building?" And she tells him things that he mostly already knows. Like, they talk about Azila briefly, and this is where Nate learns that Mandy's judgmental because she's just like, I don't know what's up with her. She'd look really pretty if she didn't do all that stuff with her hair.
That is... Yeah, it's just, she's such a, I don't know, such a mildly infuriating and problematic character, you know?
Yes.
But I think that's kind of like just a telltale sign of, like, I guess, real characters, you know? Because there's so many people like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also mentions that he still needs to, like, get his internet set up. So Mandy recommends that he go and talk to Veek, who is one of the building's tenants. She has a Wi-Fi set up for, like, the whole building, and she charges very cheap for it. So he's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so when they get up to the 3rd floor landing, she's like, okay, well, this is me. And then, she opens her apartment, and Nate realizes... This
I found really interesting, actually. So, like, when they open the doors, they realize that, like, kind of the apartment's layouts are just all sorts of fucked up and, like, arranged really awkwardly and weird. Some people don't have kitchens, and so this kind of, like, then carries on. So I think in this thing, who is it that Nate was with? I can't remember her name.
So here it's Mandy. But there is a later chapter in this episode where we're gonna find out that another apartment is also, like, totally different than these two.
Yeah, which is so oddball. It does. Yeah. I don't know. It kind of gives that vibe because a lot of like old buildings, when they get turned into like apartments, the layouts are all kind of like fucked up. Every apartment is a different sort of thing,
So Nate has, like, Mandy comments that he has, like, a real kitchen. She's like, oh my gosh, you have a real kitchen right next to the door. And he's like, you don't? And she's like, no, I've just got this little kitchenette. And it's, like, on the far side of her apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's odd.
It's very strange. Just like a tiny little, like, I don't know, like in a hotel, which is not really the kitchen you want when you live in somewhere.
So and that's pretty much it. Like, the chapter ends with her just kind of shutting the door to her apartment.
Yeah.
Like, it really, this chapter, like, it establishes two things, right? Like, it establishes that the building is a landmark. Yeah. It establishes the apartments are screwed up. And I mean, and it also establishes that Mandy is, like, your typical, like, sweet yet, like, judgy, conservative young lady.
Yeah.
Like, just a little bit more.
Chapter 8. How Nate met his newest neighbor, Tim.
So, in this chapter, Nate had a crappy week, and it's Friday, he's coming home from work. It was a crappy time finding parking, because it mentions that there was a moving truck, and there was some other jerk taking up 2 parking spots. Like, he was trying to, like, signal to the guy, like, hey, I'm trying to park. Could you move? And the guy just didn't fucking acknowledge him. So he had to park, like, 2 blocks off or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, he realizes that the moving truck is somebody moving into the building, and Tony's there. So he probed her for info about why the building was a national landmark. It was something he meant to look up at work because that's where he's been doing most of his web surfing.
Yeah.
And that's why he hasn't bothered to get his internet set up, because he always just web surfs at work, which mood.
Yeah.
And I loved this little interaction that they had, because like how often does that happen, right? Where you like ask somebody a specific question because of a reason, and the answer they give you is the reason that you have. You know?
What you mean?
Hey, well, what I mean is, so in this moment, he's like, hey, so I was wondering if you could tell me, like, you know, about, like, the plaques.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's a national landmark. And it's like, yes, I know. The plaques fucking say that it's a national landmark.
Yeah, I get you. I mean. Yeah, and, like, even after probing, she eventually just relents and is like, I don't know. It's old. I don't actually know. It's just old.
Really old. She's like, it's really old. Didn't you see the plaque? It was built in 1894. And he's just like, that's it? It's old?
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like, expect something more as well. I'd expect like a reason.
No, but she recommended that he speak with Oscar about it. And in the meantime, she would ask the main office and let him know like what she found out next time she was like at the apartments.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
I want to find out so much, but this is kind of like the point where I was like, you know, this is quite intriguing now. You know, there was enough things.
This interaction was the tipping point for you?
I don't think this was like the main tipping point, but this was kind of like the start of me going, okay, I can kind of get on board with like the trail of breadcrumbs, because it was like getting more and more kind of like frequent with the information that they were putting out. Everything started getting stranger. You know, all the apartments are in like weird arrangements. The whole building kind of like, it's just the vibes keep adding up, you know?
Yeah. Like this book, I never noticed this until I started taking notes for this podcast, but this book does a very good job of like just each chapter just trickling a little bit more information.
I would argue kind of like a little bit in the earlier chapters. For me personally, it wasn't enough. Maybe I'm just really impatient though. Like it was such a slow trail of, you know.
It is a little bit that. For me, I was, when I first read this book, I was fine with it because like I was just like so invested in the narrator. Like
that's fair.
Like I loved how the narrator conveyed Nate. Like I found Nate very relatable. Like even as a teenager, I found him relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of points where I think it's going to come up later, but there's a couple of scenes where I find that the writing is very kind of like accurate to how thinking is, if that makes sense. There's like it happens a few times where like
well, let's get into it when we get there.
Yeah, okay.
But so here in this chapter, in this moment, after he speaks with Tony, which there was a little bit in there that I noticed when I was listening to it again last night. Like Tony makes a comment about like you know, how she wishes she could get a place with rent that cheap. And he's like, oh, well, maybe you could move in. And then she gives him, like, this blinding smile. And he's like, okay, it wasn't that funny.
Yeah. That kind of, like, gives me the vibe that she knows what's up. I feel like, especially, like, as a realtor, trying to constantly sell the rooms to people in this house and seeing how many people come and go and, you know, and how everybody talks about the bad vibes. If she doesn't know specifically what's up, she knows that there's something dodgy about it.
Absolutely. So Nate meets his newest neighbor, the one that's currently moving in. His name is Tim Barr. Nate, he's reminded of a strict gym teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
I kind of noticed how easily they were. Well, I say I noticed as if I was there. No, the narrator noticed how easily the furniture, like, noted how easily the furniture was being like thrown up the stairs, and how like huge the like movers and Tim was, and how easy everything seemed to be, like lifting the heavy boxes and stuff. Kind of like towering individuals.
Big men. Yeah. And so, like, they're chatting a little bit. We learn, like, the reason why Tim's here is because, like, he came to LA to, like, find himself after retiring. We learn that Nate came to LA for a girl 6 years ago.
Is that in this scene?
Oh, well, it's in my notes.
Okay, cool. Must be.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Because I couldn't tell whether it was, like, a later interaction or not.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
But so Tim asks him about the sun deck. Nate says it's awesome. So Tim's like, okay, well, maybe we can meet up there later and have a beer. And then that's when Nate clues Tim into Zila. Yeah. And Tim says that sadly, he's reached the age where seeing a naked young lady makes him feel like a dirty old man instead of turned on.
It's just so unnecessary. Just like, so, you know.
But honestly, though, like, it's not, because, like, I put in my notes good. I wish my dad had felt that way in his old age.
Oh, God.
No, like, there was this moment where, like, I had reached a certain age, like, I was a young adult, and my dad he briefly dated a woman in her mid-20s, and he was, like, in his late 60s.
Yeah.
And I told my dad straight up, like, when he told me how old this woman was, I was like, okay, Dad, I'm making a new rule. He's like, oh, no, what? And I was like, you are not allowed to date anyone younger than me. You're not allowed.
That's got to be so jarring.
It was so fucking weird, man. Yeah. So, honestly, I'm glad that Tim feels like a dirty old man at the idea of seeing a young naked lady. Yeah. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, I could...
Anyway.
My voice break. Yeah, I can agree with that.
This is where we get into what you were saying earlier with Mandy's apartment, because Nate notices that Tim's apartment is designed completely different from his or Mandy's apartment. Because Tim, he makes a comment about how a floor plan would be nice, and then he's like, yeah, that's what I was saying, like, a floor plan would be nice, like, I'll figure something out, but it's all tiny rooms and hallways.
Yeah, which, like, kind of implies that it's the same size as the other apartments. It's just, like, you know, roomed off. So, like, I assume that every single room that he's got is just like a box, and it's all just horrible little boxes, you know?
Yeah, that is the impression that I get, because, like, literally it's just like it's this narrow hallway as soon as you walk in.
Yeah. Can you imagine moving somewhere without, like, a floor plan or without seeing the place?
No. Well, because that's something that was brought up, right? Like, Tim moved into this place sight unseen.
Yeah.
Like he was coming from out of state. He just needed a place, and this was the most convenient place, obviously. I mean, like, you know, he like the impression I get was he decided to move into this place based on price alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you can't blame him. Like, you can't blame anybody who moves into this building based on the price.
No.
Apparently, there's people moving into places that they haven't seen in London.
Yeah?
Yeah, and, like...
That seems less and less plausible now, because you could at least get pictures.
True. What's actually crazy, though, is people are, like, putting down a year's worth of rent to try and secure places in London at the moment.
Yeah, like, I've heard
crazy.
I've recently heard about, like, there's these plans that people get that where, like, they will start, it's almost like a reverse mortgage, but not quite, because instead of people getting a payout from a bank, they'll get a payout from someone that just wants to buy your house when you're dead. And so, like, every month they're paying essentially a mortgage payment for, like, 10, 15 years until someone dies. And that's, like, securing their rights to buy the place when the people die.
That's so interesting.
As it turns out, audience, this book is secretly about housing and how it's a crisis and how people will do crazy things to have a place to live.
Yeah. That's that's it. We've cracked the mystery.
Anyways, Nate goes back to his own apartment and he notices a couple cockroaches. So he captures one with a glass. The other one scurries away before he can capture that one too. And so this is our first look at one of these cockroaches, like a close-up look.
Yeah.
So he's looking at it and he notices it's missing a leg, but then like he's looking at it a little bit more and he realizes, no, it has an extra leg.
That is... Yeah. It did stand out to me that these cockroaches have an extra leg. I mean, which is more of a standout? The fact that they're like, is it blue or green or the extra leg?
Green. Well, I mean, green is what initially makes it stand out, right?
Yeah.
But it is odd that it's just got an extra leg.
True.
Yeah. But the chapter ends with him, like, you know, pitying the roach and deciding to let it go, and then like it scurries under the microwave after his friend.
That's such an audible decision.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I don't know about that one. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah,
I don't know either. I mean, maybe it looked just pathetic enough. Like, I don't know.
How
like,
does
you've never sometimes squashed a spider and then other times let this move the spider outside?
I know, but he didn't do either of those.
You're right.
He just let it back roam free in his apartment. Like, in his apartment. He's like, hello, little cockroach. Let me just let you scurry under my fridge. Like.
Chapter 9. How Nate discovered a fake door. So, it's been a month in his new place. Nate has fully unpacked. He's fully moved in. He realizes he has nothing to do, so he grabs a beer. He decides to explore the building, starting with the sunroof.
Yes.
So this bit I thought was interesting, I guess just because I'm a man. Like, he sees Zila's note indicating that she was up there, and he toyed with the idea of getting another beer and joining her, but he decided against it because the only reason he had to do so was to see her naked. And her matter-of-fact, like, nonchalant attitude about her body, like, took all the fun out of it.
Yeah, that was really... That was just a really weird... I don't know. I don't know about that one. It was very odd. This section was very odd.
I don't know. Like, the thing about it that stood out to me as a kid was how, like, Nate compared it to, like, how he heard all the fun of nudity is gone when you're on
film
sets of a porn set. Like, it's so mechanical, it takes all the fun out of it. He compared it to that. Like, going out there and, like, hanging out with a topless lady would just be no fun because she doesn't make it fun. So, no, I'm not bothering.
As if she has to make it fun. Like, that's so...
Well, I mean, he didn't phrase it that way.
I know, but it's, it's like her fault.
That's her.
So, yeah.
So he instead gets on his laptop, and that's when he realizes he doesn't have his Wi-Fi set up yet.
Yeah.
And so I guess I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Like, this is where it's mentioned that, like, he does all of his casual web surfing at work. Mm-hmm. And then that's when he remembers Mandy's advice about Veek, but he forgot. he forgot Veek's name, and he also forgot which apartment was hers. So he just wandered to the second floor lounge, and was looking around. He wondered if anyone even used the second floor lounge. And then this is the moment on my reread, for this podcast, and I was taking notes, I realized this is the moment when it's like, man, Nate just can't leave alone. Like, he just sees something and he messes with it.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to know the idea that so he knows where Mandy lives, right?
And Mandy lives across the hall from him.
Yeah, so he knows where she lives, but he can't remember Veek's name or where Veek lives. So naturally, instead of going and asking Mandy again, which is like a normal human being thing to do, he just decides to go wandering around the halls of the complex. Like, that bit to me is a bit weird. I'm not gonna lie. That's like, that kind of feels like written for him to go and find weird stuff, almost. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like...
he finds apartment 15. He's pretty sure that's the apartment, but he doesn't want to knock and be wrong and be weird about, like, oh, I'm sorry, I was looking for the person that does the internet. So instead of knocking on apartment 15, he goes and scopes out apartment 14. And this is the first time that we get a good, focus on that door.
Yeah.
Right? It had 4 hasps bolted on. Each one was padlocked. They were all old, and they had been painted over, multiple times. And so, I put in my notes here, Nate strikes me as the kind of guy who just can't sit still without fidgeting. Because for no good reason, he starts peeling paint off the doorknob.
That is... Yeah. So
this is so weird.
Was that was I think, was he checking how many layers of paint? Because it's
yes,
because you can,
that was the reason.
Yeah, if it's you can see so much of the door, and there's paint in filled in the cracks of the door, suggesting that the door hasn't been opened. There's paint over the handle, making the handle look like it doesn't twist. So it's got to be it's an inquisitive thing of how many years of painting is over this door to a point where it's it hasn't been opened for so long.
Yeah. So he peels off a bit of it, and the knob is clear glass, and he's looking at the paint that he peeled off, and it looks like at least 3 or 4 times this doorknob's been painted over.
Yeah.
It looked like this door hadn't been opened in decades. And so then he spends a bit of time wondering about apartment 14, and then he remembers apartment 23, the one without the doorknob. And he starts thinking about the elevator, which Tony said should have been fixed by now. And then Oscar's like, nah, that's never worked. And he's just thinking about the building. And so then he goes upstairs, he goes to apartment 23, and then he messes. So this I thought was interesting, right? Because I didn't understand what was going on, until, he was done, right?
Yeah.
He starts messing with the frame using a junk card. And after, a full examination of the frame, he realizes the door has no hinges.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
That is strange.
And so then he sets the card down on the floor and pushes it under the door, and it only goes in 1.5 inches, and then it just stops against something solid.
Yeah.
Right?
And I guess so this is kind of the discovery that the doors aren't real.
Yeah, it's a fake door.
Yeah.
And so then it's as he's discovering this is when Veek catches it, which startles him enough that he just falls on his ass. And she was just like, what are you doing? And so then he's just he was caught. He was just like, I think the door is fake.
Yeah. I
think it's a fake door. And she's like, yeah, you're right. It is. And then she's like, were you the one that peeled the paint off of the doorknob downstairs? So he admitted that he had, and he got curious because he was looking for the person in charge of the Wi-Fi, and and she was like, you need to be careful because Oscar gets pissed when people mess with the building. He's pretty laid back until people start messing with the building. and that she was probably going to get blamed for it. Which
Do you
was
think,
such
like,
a weird thing to say.
it would be very... I think it would be very jarring, because he's got to feel like a bit of a like crazy person, like rooting around these doors, finding out that the doors aren't real, and then...
But then she says a crazy thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
He's just like, what's going on here?
And then he's like, oh, I think I might be onto something, you know?
This episode is not brought to you by Kingmakers. Jake, have you ever heard of Kingmakers?
No, I don't have a clue.
Okay, so I'm going to share a YouTube link with you, and I'm going to share it with all of you. So we're going to time out and then time back in after Jake has watched this video.
What? What the fuck? What? Why? Just why?
So, Jake, what did you just watch?
Something. It was a thing. It really was a thing. So, a man with guns killing knights. That was, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and also a truck. There's a truck there, too.
Yeah, There was an Apache helicopter, and apparently he saved them. It looks like it's got like some weird RTS vibes in a... Is it a real thing? Is it a real thing?
This is like... in early access right now. This is a real thing.
How?
I don't know.
Why?
I just love the juxtaposition of the trailer, like the way they cut it, where it's just like, it's a bunch of medieval knights fighting in a war, and then literally a truck. Like, they get smacked by a truck.
Yeah, I thought it changed to a different game. I thought it just became like a different thing. And I was like, wow, maybe this is like a mashup of different games that are coming out, and then nope, he just started plowing into the battlefield.
So yeah, this episode is not brought to you by Kingmakers. It's in early access on Steam. You can go check that out. As you can tell, we don't have sponsors. We don't have those. So we get real silly with it. If you want to support us, you can get Jake's album. Or you can, we have in the episode description, Patreon. And we also have a PayPal. If you want to just like make a one-time donation, you can do PayPal. If you want to make a recurring contribution to the podcast, that's what the Patreon is for. Patrons get ad-free episodes. So if you become a patron, you can skip this bit. Back to the show.
How would it be to be like thinking that you're going a bit mental? Like, oh my god, there's doors in this building that are not real doors. What is going on here? And then the first person you tell is just so matter of fact about it. Like, they're not. You're right.
No, you're right. It is fake.
But you need to stop messing around.
Yeah, he's like, why? What's going on here? And she just ignores the question.
Yeah.
She's like, all right, come by my apartment. I'll set something up for your Wi-Fi. Like, come by my apartment around noon tomorrow. Don't be late. And so the chapter just kind of ends with Nate sitting on the floor. So I guess my question for you before we move on to the next chapter is, what do you think is up with these two apartments?
So I was still kind of like in there's people living in like the off-cut parts of the building. You know, You think that, like, all the places locked off, there are people there? Yeah, at this point, I felt like it was some weird thing where it's like there's people living, you know, like the family from, like, the first intro, you know? Just like...
from Chapter 0.
Yeah.
Chapter 10. How Nate drank beer with Tim on the sun deck.
So this chapter starts like pretty much where the last one left off. Like, Nate's getting up off the floor, and as he's getting up, Tim spots him while going up stairwell, like he's holding groceries.
Yeah.
And so he asks Nate, like, if he wants to go up to the sun deck for a beer. So Nate agrees. Nate meets him up there while Tim goes to drop his stuff off and then go up there. Zila's gone. Like, she snuck away at some point. And Nate is both frustrated and relieved.
So my question is how?
I don't know.
Right?
It's a good question. I don't know.
What if it's like, because what if she knows what's going on in the building? And what if...
Do you know?
Go on.
I think I don't know for a fact. This is just a wild hypothesis.
Okay.
I think that while he was fucking around with apartment 14, that's when she got to her apartment. Like, she totally just walked by him, and he was so engrossed with fucking peeling paint that she just kept going on her way.
Yeah, maybe. I think maybe she went into, like, the thing on the roof and can just, like, navigate around on the inside of, maybe it's something like that.
Into that room?
Yeah.
On the roof? Yeah.
Into, like, the hidden catacombs of the building, like...
Okay. So he and Tim, they're chatting up on the roof. Like, we learn a little bit about Tim here. Like, he says that he ran, like, a publishing company for decades. Like, and, and Nate's like, anything I would have read? And he was like, no, it was like,
manuals and
shit. Yeah. And so, but then, like, one day he woke up and he was just like, he had one of those moments when he's like, what are you doing with your life? And it wasn't too long after that, like maybe a week or so later, that someone offered to buy him out for double what he would have accepted. So he sold it and then moved out here.
Yeah. That's fair enough, to be honest.
Yeah. Like, like you reach a certain age and it's just like, what have I been doing all my life?
I hope I never get to that point, like, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think you will. Because, I mean, I've known you for a while now, and you always are, like, jumping on what you want to be doing, not what you think you should be doing.
I try. I don't always get that bit right, though, It's like...
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. I do try. I think that it's better to try and do, like, the things that you want than just settle for doing stuff that you think you should do,
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the book.
Well, I mean, it's kind of relevant to what we're discussing
That's true.
in this chapter,
though,
because the conversation turns towards Nate, right? And he's talking about, like, how he's 32 and, like, he still hasn't figured out what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Like, he's basically like, you ever get to, like, high school and college and you realize, like, this is what I need to be doing with my life. But then, like, you like, he says that, like, how, like, some people, they just kind of figure out, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And Tim's like, sure. And he's like, that would never happen for me. I never figured out that I should be doing this. So I just don't, like, I don't know. I hoped that as I chalked it up to me being in my 20s. I figured, like, I would figure it out eventually. And I'm 32 now, and I still have no idea what I should be doing. And then that's this moment where Tim kind of, like, like this older figure is like, well, there's the other side of that coin is there's so many people out there who think that they're supposed to be doing this with their life. And then they realize that this isn't what they were supposed to be doing at all. And he's like, I cannot tell you how many people in my life I have seen that think that they need to be doing this, but they would have been far better suited for anything else.
Yeah, but I also kind of, like, I think that whole conversation that they have kind of is almost ignorant to the idea of what people want, if that makes sense. It's like there's at no point do they suggest kind of like people should be doing what they want. It's the idea that people should be doing what suits them skill-wise from both sides, which I think is quite... Because what if you just enjoy doing the thing that's not in a skill set for you naturally more, It's like by the kind of like ethos of the conversation that they have, you shouldn't do that thing because you're not suited to it.
I think the thing that wasn't mentioned was on purpose. Like, I think that was intentional.
That makes sense.
Based on what happens in the next few chapters, I think it makes sense that the topic didn't become, well, you should actually be doing what you want to do in life.
Yeah,
you know?
That makes sense.
Because, like, that's just not the kind of characters these two are.
Yeah.
That was touched on a little bit with Zila when she was introduced.
Yes.
Right? You know, she was like, art is what I do, but it isn't my job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, me personally, I'm 28 now, right? And I've reached a point in my life where I figured out, like, what I'm meant to be doing with my life has nothing to do with how I make money.
That makes sense.
No, you know,
yeah.
like, you know, for instance, I'm podcasting. You know, I'm doing this book club.
Yeah.
I really enjoy doing this book club. It's probably not going to make me any money. I would like for it to make me money, but it probably won't.
To be honest with you, I've listened to this podcast quite a few times, and the frequency at which the podcast kind of improves, I think it's only a matter of time until this turns into something that, you know, generates you income, you know, and it's kind of like it's of the quality. It's entertaining. It's fun. You know, it's something that people can interact with. I think it's brilliant.
I appreciate that. I mean, but at the same time, though, I can't bank on that.
True. I think gradual kind of like way, like do the things that you enjoy potentially, you know, on the side, and if it can't generate the income, then, you know, you have to kind of like look at what can at that point, you know?
Yeah. But circling back.
Anyway,
completely
off topic.
No, but that actually
but like
works,
on
though,
but
because,
off topic, yeah.
Because in this moment, Tim changes the subject, and he's like, "What is that?" And then Nate like looks over, and it's like, you know, the big ass room on the roof. Yeah. And he's like, "Oh yeah," and he tells Tim what Zila told him, that, like, you know, that it's like, you know, the room for like all the tech for the elevator. Yeah. And Tim's like, "You mean the machine room?" And he's like, "Yeah, I guess." And he's like, "I've never seen a machine room that big." And you know, he's like, "Well, Zila says she figures that it's just, you know, because it's a really old building, so, you know, things were just bigger back then."
Yeah, miniaturization.
Like, and this was one of those moments, like the way this chapter ends, like that. Like, I thought this chapter ended, like, perfectly, right? Because Tim was like, "I've only ever seen a machine room that big one other time."
Yeah.
And it was the machine room for the Empire State Building.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, that really made me wonder. Like, it was just like, okay, well, obviously it's not a fucking machine room then.
Yeah.
Because there's no way, like, it could be that fucking big for a 3-story or 5-story building. Like, it's just, no.
Yeah.
So that, you know,
so
the question
what, at
is,
this point then,
what is it?
Yeah, at this point, I guess, kind of like, what would you think that it was? What's your theory?
Fuck if I know.
Or you've already, you can answer it. Because you've already read the book, so, like,
I've
before.
Already read the book,
yeah.
I would love to answer this question. Yeah. Like, I would love to, if I could read any book and, like, be able to read it again, like, you know, wipe my memory, read it over again, I would love to read this book over again blind.
Yeah.
I don't, and to answer your, like, half-assed question, like, what did I think it was originally?
Yeah.
The answer was, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. So here's the problem with me, right? I'm a dunce. Like, when it comes to mystery novels, I love reading them, but I am terrible about, like, theorizing about what the fuck is going on. Most of the time, I'm just here for the ride.
That's fair. I can kind of relate to that a little bit, because I try to work it out, but with, like, such, I don't know, low... I mean, it's like my theories that I come up with are, like, so low effort. You know? That's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like, I try my best, based off of,
you
know?
based off of your theories.
Yeah.
This big room on the roof is Gremlin HQ.
Yes, yeah. Currently I'm like Gremlin HQ.
Chapter 11. How Nate discovered he wasn't the only one curious about his building.
This is where it really picked up for me, actually, this chapter.
And that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
It was like all of the breadcrumbs. It was like nobody took enough interest, I think. Like none of the characters took enough interest in what was going on for me to buy in yet, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it's like the second Nate started buying in a little bit, so he starts exploring, he starts getting like really nosy, and then it's like this next chapter is the introduction of like, well, he's not the only one that's noticing these things. He's not the only inquisitive one, you know? But it's like, even though people are noticing, they don't want to rock the boat because of how good the deal is.
Yeah. And that's when that becomes explicitly clear in this chapter.
Yeah.
Because when he's talking to Veek, like, well, hold on, let's go through
Yeah.
it. So it's Sunday afternoon. He way overslept. It's like 12:20, and he does that thing that everyone does when they first wake up. That like they have to kind of boot up their memory a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's just like kind of thinking about what he's gonna do with his day, and then he remembers shit. I was supposed to be at Veek's at noon, and she told me not to be late. And so, like, he does...
This is what I was on about earlier.
version of grooming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just so relatable to how people think.
It's like and the way that it was written as well, where it was like he was going through his morning and his day and, like, what he wanted to do with his day, and he was going, oh, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do... And then it interrupts with him remembering... Like, yeah, literally. So, yeah. Very, very real.
Like,
I live that on a daily basis, so.
Yeah. So then, like, you know, he rushes down to her apartment, and she's, like, very cold when he arrives. Like, you know, he's apologetic, trying to explain. She says nothing, just leaves the door open for him, so he just lets himself in.
Yeah.
And... like, at first, he's surprised, like, that Veek's wearing a sweater, but then it makes sense when he goes into the apartment because it's cold.
Yeah.
And so then, she sets him up with the Wi-Fi, and, like, she tells him that she wants $10 a month, which is actually that's a good
It's
deal.
very reasonable. I mean, the only thing about it that's not reasonable, actually, is the fact that all of the internet goes through her, and she explicitly says... that she can just look at people's history and like exactly what I know, but like, you know, even for that deal, it's like, ooh, you know. But
I mean, it explains why it's so cheap, though, right?
True.
Because it seems to me what the deal is that she's set up Wi-Fi for herself. She's the only connection, and so she's literally just setting up, she's just giving everybody their own passwords for their own connections.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally all going through her. That's why it's so cheap.
Yeah.
And so because it's all going through her, she could just straight up, how does she put it? She's like, if I wanted to, I could see what porn you download, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And he's just like, all right. And she's like, give me $10, but he only has a $20 bill. And so she's like, all right, if you give me that 20, we'll consider that payment for 3 months. That's
an extra good deal.
It's an extra good deal, but he's so poor. He still has to crunch the numbers in his head for a moment. Just think, like, can I afford to give up this 20 right now? And so, but you know, he gives it to her. Yeah.
And then she asks if he wants to change the password. And then he, like, does, what is it, like, some...
He's like, add 144 to the front of the password.
Yeah.
Because that's when it comes up that it all goes through her. He's like, can't I just change my password later? She's like, nope, it all goes through me. I can change it for you right now, but I'm the one that does all that.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, put a 144 in front of it. And she's like, ooh, clever. That's good. It's easy to remember, but it'll make it more complex. And it's like, okay, cool, whatever.
I know. That bit I felt was a little bit unnecessary. I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like a very, like, shallow attempt to, like, show that Nate is smart still, but then it's also
and that Veek is also
as smart as him, you know. But
yeah,
it's like
it's a very these two characters are so smart kind of moment.
Yeah. I felt like there'd probably be a better way to do that in a more natural, you know. Do you get what I mean?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
There's little things like that occasionally.
Like, honestly, I think the moment would have been fine if Veek just didn't say what she said in response.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Well, so anyway, so then this is when Nate is going to leave, he notices multiple thermometers of different types.
Yeah.
All of them reading 69 degrees Fahrenheit.
I know. And the next bit I was like, was super, I don't know, weird. And just like really, I felt like so jarring and so unnecessary. Do you get what I mean?
It was. It really was. It was like he sees all of these, and like his mind doesn't even go to sex. But she's like, "All right, get the stupid joke out of the way." And he's like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean." She's like, "You're a man who's seen the number 69 multiple times. Just get the joke out of the way. Just do it. It's fine." And that makes sense in a way, right? Like,
yeah.
Because, like, I imagine she has encountered multiple men who, like, me personally, like, I mean, my wife and I, we joke about that all the time. Like, she, like whenever the number 69 comes up, like, easily one of us, it could be either of us, we'll just go, hey,
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
But so she's like, go on, get the joke out of the way. And he doesn't even make a joke.
Yeah. And I think like, it's not even that because he was like, I actually wasn't thinking that. And then she refuses to believe him and then makes him try and make a joke anyway, which I was like, this is fucking cringe.
And it's just a fucking poor attempt. It was cringe. Really and honestly, though, I think that was on purpose.
Yeah, I get you. But also, I feel like, I don't know. I felt like it was just a bit weird. Like, the rest of the book has been written, like, quite well, you know? And then, like, that one bit, I was like, it just feels a bit oddball, you know?
It is a bit oddball. But moving on to to like, the actual meat of of this chapter, she explains the oddity about her apartment, which is no matter what she does, her apartment is always 69 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. It doesn't matter if she's got her oven going, if she's got her doors wide open. It doesn't matter. It is always 69 degrees in the apartment.
Just seems improbable.
Which is... It does, doesn't it? And so that's what prompts Nate to tell her about the light fixture in his apartment.
Yeah.
And then she tells him about apartments 5 and 16.
Mm-hmm.
She tells him that nobody stays in apartment 5 for very long.
Mm-hmm.
And then nobody stays in 16 ever. Like, it's never shown.
And it was
rent.
after someone, because she asked, like, one of the people that's been living there for, like, 20 years about apartment 16.
Yeah.
And
she asked one of the older tenants.
Yeah. And it was like someone killed themselves in that room. And then after that, they never rented it out again.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is perplexing.
Yeah. I mean... arguably, maybe just lower the rent.
But, yeah, like, this apartment is gonna be $400 a month.
Yeah.
Wow, so cheap. Why? It's like, oh well, someone killed themselves in there. It's like, I mean, it's so cheap though.
I know.
But yeah, so Veek, like, she spends a moment, like, considering him, and then, like, asks him if he wants to see something mind-blowing. And then this is where Nate makes an actually better joke, and he's just like, I don't know, I've seen some pretty wild tattoos.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, this just tells me that Nate is better about making wisecracks when he's not, like, forced to.
Yeah, when it's not like awkward pressure into like trying to make a joke,
like,
you know?
Come on, make a stupid sex joke. And he's like, I was never going to make a stupid sex joke.
Yeah. I'll do that when I want to, not when you tell me to.
But yeah. So she's like, no, seriously, I want to show you something about the building, but you may lose sleep over it. And he's like, show me.
Chapter 12. How Nate crossed the street and discovered wonders about his new home.
What's really interesting about this, right, is I thought that it was going to be something way more dramatic than it actually ended up being, right? But also, what it ended up being is so, I don't know, interesting. You know? Like, what it ended up being was more interesting than, like, I thought the dramatic thing was going to be. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. It's, like, it's odd, but I don't know if it's, like, lose sleep over it odd.
Yeah. So they end up, like, going outside, and they're looking at the building, and Vik is, like, pestering him to just keep looking at the building. And he's like, just tell me. And she's saying, it is just much better if you work it out yourself, which I understand, but also, as a reader, infuriated me. You know,
I like how Nate kind of like lampoons it a little bit here. He's just like, "What? Nobody can be told what the Matrix is," and she's like, "Yeah, basically."
Yeah.
And so, like, he can't figure it out, and Vik's like, she makes him cross the street, and she's like, look at the building over here.
Yeah.
And, like, he's worried about people, like, asking about them, and she's like, what are you worried about? Like, we're just looking at our apartment. Yeah. If anybody asks, we'll just tell them we're looking at our apartment.
I know. It was strange that he was, like, felt like he was doing something wrong, almost. He's just looking at the building.
Yeah, and so, like, she gives him a hint when he asks for it by asking, like, what's on top of the building we're now standing by? And so, like, he still doesn't get it, and he starts to ask for another hint, and then that's when it clicks.
Yeah.
Right? And he realizes...
I felt like the realization was written quite well as well, because it was, like... he was going through the process of looking at it, and it, like, interrupts in the same way those types of realizations do. So I feel like the writer does that very well in this book.
Yeah. Yes, he's very good at, like, train of thought.
Yeah.
And more specifically, he's very good at interrupting trains of thought.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that about it as well. And so what he realizes is that his apartment building doesn't have any power lines running to it. It only has internet and cable lines.
I know. And then this drastically changed my theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I still haven't fully formulated this theory, but I reckon so my current stance is that the building is a historic landmark for some, like, oddball, crazy science, permanent power generatory thing that would have been shut down, like, years ago, like 100 years ago, and then it gets shut down.
Yeah.
But then they keep it on in secret, and they, like, still doing experiments, and they still, and that's why massive parts of the building are closed off, because they're doing that. And that is what my current theory is.
You think it's a science experiment?
Yeah, but there's also, like, a certain level of, like, because it's not a fully formulated idea. There's got to be something sinister about it, but I don't know what the sinister thing is yet.
I get you. Okay. So yeah, that the chapter basically just ends with Vik like, we are not hooked into the LA power.
Yeah.
And Nate's like, but then how are we getting electricity? And she's like, I have no idea.
And then proceed to lose sleep,
Chapter 13. How Nate and Vik decided to investigate the Kavach building together. So Vik and Nate, they go back to her apartment. They chat about the building a bit. Like, she serves him, like, a diet rum and coke.
Crack some diet cokes.
So she tells him about, like, how when she first noticed the power thing, she asked Oscar about it.
Mm-hmm.
He shrugged her off. She spent, like, a week in denial, approached him again. He deflected. He was like, he started talking about how, like, this is a great place, and if she becomes a disruptive influence, he'll have her evicted.
Yeah.
So she dropped it because she makes minimum wage, and this building is a godsend.
And this kind of like, to me, pushes the idea that Oscar knows what's going on. Like, he fully knows, you know?
He knows something for sure.
Yeah.
Like, he knows enough to be like, hey, don't look into this or I will get you evicted.
Yeah. And then this is kind of like when they start talking about all the research that Veek has actually done, because she was just as curious as Nate was. So she starts looking around online. She assumes that the K on the stone, on like the, what's it called, at the front of the building, is like...
Yeah, the cornerstone.
Yeah, it's like...
She assumes that's related to the Kavach name on the front
So she
door.
starts looking for people who have Kavach as the last name, and she can't find anyone.
She finds one person. She finds P.T. Kavach.
Yeah.
That's a person. But she couldn't figure out who WNA was. She has a very minimal amount of information. She assumes P.T. Kavach was a man, given the time and the place, like when it was built.
Yeah.
So then they start like swapping notes. Like Nate shares what he and Tim discussed about the brick room on the roof and how Tim figures it isn't a machine room at all.
Yeah.
Veek never paid it much notice, but she says she'll add it to her list. And I'm just thinking, like, of course she has a list.
Yeah. It makes sense to have a list, to be fair.
Yeah, no, it does. Like, once you start noticing enough, it's like, I can't keep track of all this. So then she asks to see the blacklight in his apartment. So they go, and she's like, oh, this is cool. He doesn't agree.
Yeah.
Which I agree. It's not cool. Like, you need light in your kitchen. That is so annoying.
I would be fuming. Yeah. The first thing I would do is I would like plug in a lamp and then test whether it's like something that just happens in the kitchen, you know?
That is a good idea.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen in this
Does
book.
it not? That's so dumb.
I don't get the impression Nate cooks.
Does he never have a meal?
As I recall, it doesn't really come up in this book.
That's funny.
Him cooking. Like, there's no chapter, as I recall, dedicated to him, like, cooking. Or like, in any capacity.
Postmates. Uber Eats. Deliveroo.
This is before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So then, like, she suggests they snoop around, and, like, this I thought was funny, because, like, he teases her about it. Like, I didn't think anybody ever used that word, and, like, he compares her to Velma. What I liked about him comparing her to Velma during that conversation was he implied that he was Shaggy. And then she's like, "Oh, don't get mad. Everybody liked Velma. I get you.
Yeah. Get you an orange jumper and some glasses, like."
Yeah, exactly. And then she's like, "All right, fine. If you're not interested, you don't have to be a jerk about it." And he's like, "No, I'm in. And this is the moment where he thinks about his life and like how he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and like the risk of getting caught by Oscar is worth it for him.
Yes,
like, he's in. He wants to figure out what's going on with this fucking building.
Yeah, I don't know how that
how the chapter
gives
ends.
His like. Can you imagine being in his situation, right? In this, what if it turned out to be something super mundane? You end up getting kicked out of your building anyway, and you still work a data entry job. That decision doesn't make sense to me. I'm not gonna lie. It's such poor decision making.
I imagine that it is one of those things where, if it turned out to have been something mundane, he would have completely forgotten about his reasoning about why it was worth it.
That's fair. That makes sense.
Because, like, it would have been one of those things where it's like, oh, it turned out to be nothing. So, like, I imagine in that moment, people would, to save face with themselves and not feel like an idiot, would just, like, conveniently forget that they were like, oh yeah, I did this because I've got nothing going on in my life.
That's so funny. The idea of saving face with yourself is so good.
Well,
I don't want to look like an idiot to me, you know.
No, it's actually something I've discussed on this podcast before.
Okay.
It's called cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
Right? It's something that people do whenever they like do something that would be like basically like an evil act. Like
I get you.
So like, you know, nobody wants to think of themselves as evil.
Yeah.
So like the hoops that people will mentally jump through to not think of themselves badly.
Yeah.
Like that's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. I get you. That makes sense.
But yeah, no, that's it for this episode. So we've got so here, let's see, with the major clues of this episode, we've got, what do we got? We've got Nate's blacklight.
Yeah.
We've got Veek's apartment temperature.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the ornate doors downstairs.
Yes.
The big ass room on the roof.
Yep. The not being attached to power.
Yeah, the power line, like they're not attached to the power grid.
The washing machine on the left,
door.
not dry.
The washing machine on the left is wet. The fake door for apartment 23. The abandoned apartment 16.
Cockroaches with extra legs.
Cockroaches with extra legs that are green. Weird vibes in apartment 5.
Yeah. The
Oscar.
Did you mention apartment 16?
I did.
Okay.
I did mention apartment 16. And then of course apartment 14.
Yes.
Which is important because that's the cover of the book.
That is the cover of the book and the name of the book.
It's the name of the book, 14.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the deal with that place is, but, you know, we know it's got to be important.
The home. The home of the gremlins.
Oh, yeah. Something about apartment 14 that came up that Veek told Nate was that you can't even see into apartment 14 from the street. The windows are painted over.
I forgot about that.
About
yeah,
that
yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and then also that the layouts of the apartments are all different.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they didn't bring up the layout of Veek's apartment, but at the very least, Nate, Mandy, and Tim, their apartments are all different.
Yeah, and Oscar knows. We now know that Oscar. Well, we can assume that Oscar knows kind of what's going on.
Something.
Yeah.
He knows to dissuade people from looking in.
Yeah.
Like that's the trap of this place being so cheap.
Yeah. So I still kind of stand by my theory that there's some sort of like, you know, science-y vibes happening.
Sure.
Yeah. Or they're just or it's just like, you know, they're stealing power from a neighbor. You know, like maybe it's just that.
They're stealing power.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where we're at. So, for you folks at home that have never read this book, what do you think is happening? Let us know. But, honor system, don't cheat. Don't, skip ahead and then answer this question. Tell us what you think right now, having only listened to the first 13 chapters.
Does this mean that after this episode now I get to keep listening?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think... Given the length of these chapters, because they're so short, I think it makes sense to do 7 chapters an episode.
I'm quite excited.
I'm glad to hear it. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for you too. I mean, hell, now you get some more tidbits.
Yeah. The Scooby-Doo vibes. Have landed.
We will record We will record again in a week, and all of you will hear from us again in 2 weeks.
Amazing.
Bye.
Bye.